Welcome to HMS, let the power flow. Feel the rhythm in your veins. Every rapid nitro flame.
All right, so in this video, we are going to go through the dietary and fluid requirements of athletes. I will cover a range of athletes for each segment. So I'll probably do like an aerobic type athlete and an anaerobic type athlete. And we will look at the 3 timing schedules that people would be eating. So like pre-performance, during performance, and post-performance. Let's go. All right, so here are our pre-performance guidelines, okay? So the goals of our pre-performance nutrition is to ensure that we have adequate glycogen stores for ATP resynthesis. So remember, regardless of whether you are an anaerobic or an aerobic athlete, a lot of your ATP resynthesis is going to be derived from glycogen. So we need to make sure we've got enough in the body to fuel the performance, okay? Obviously, you can start to think naturally that some performances last longer than others, and yes, you are correct. The ones that last longer will need more glycogen. We also need to ensure we have adequate hydration, and I'll give you some guidelines for that in a minute. And also low fiber foods to reduce gut issues, okay? Because if you're running a marathon or a triathlon, the last thing you want to do is have gut or intestinal issues and then you need to go to the toilet or whatever. So we have low fiber foods which are easily absorbed by the body. Another strategy which is popular is carbohydrate loading or carb loading, all right? So it is a strategy to oversaturate the glycogen source, so you eat more than what's necessary just to really make sure that you can use every single gram that you have in your body. It's generally only recommended for events that last 90 minutes or longer, okay? Because anything under that, you're not really gonna need that much glycogen. And it must be combined with tapered training. So remember from our previous videos, on periodization, we're looking at tapered training, which is reducing the training load so that you can therefore recover. Well, part of that is also making sure that glycogen storage is held in the body. Because if you are carb loading, but then you increase the amount of training you're doing, well, you're not gonna be storing extra, and that's a waste. So the guideline for our carb loading is the first one I'll give you, which is 8 to 12 grams per kilogram per day. And you generally start that 36 to 48 hours prior to the event. All right. So if you weighed 70 kilos, for example, and you just hit that sweet spot in the middle, 10 grams, it's probably the easiest way for you guys to remember it. So 10 grams per kilogram per day. All right. You weigh 70 kilos, guess what? 2 days before your event, you're going to have 700 grams of carbohydrates. The day before your event, 700 grams of carbohydrates. And then immediately before your event, is a different story. So I'll rub this off and I'll give you the examples of like an aerobic and an anaerobic athlete for pre-performance. Okay, so looking at pre-performance, so this is all before the event. So let's do our aerobic athlete, and I've just used a marathon runner because it's the most obvious. So they should have a large meal, so whether they've carbohydrate loaded or not, okay, could dictate how large this meal is, all right? But let's just say that they've done it anyway, and now. So we're gonna do a large meal 3 to 4 hours prior to the event. The meal is gonna be high in carbohydrates, lower in fat, and lower in fiber, so it's easily absorbed and doesn't take as long to digest because fat slows down digestion and doesn't cause, gas and stuff, which is what fiber does. So a good example would be just like cereal with honey and banana, okay? The aim of this meal is to provide 1 to 4 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. So, you put it in the sweet spot and you just go 2 grams of carbs per kilo. So once again, someone who weighs 70 kilos, they're gonna have 140 grams of carbohydrates in that meal 4 hours before their event, okay? They may or may not have carb loaded, okay? That doesn't change this. As far as fluid goes, they probably should have had half a litre of water with this meal or around that meal timing, okay? And then 20 minutes before the event, they should top up that water with a cup or about 300 mils of water. Cup is 250 mils, by the way. So you could just halve that to make it easy for your memory. Actually, you know what? Let's do that anyway. Let's write it. 250 mils. So half a litre, 4 hours before, and then 1 cup, 20 minutes before. Now our anaerobic athletes, so imagine like a weightlifter, Olympic weightlifter or someone like that, They're just going to have a light meal because they don't want to have a heavy tummy when they're going in and like putting in an all-out exertion, because that could cause vomiting or the other end having major issues as well. And it detracts from the focus that they should have on what they need to do, as in lift the heavy thing. That meal should probably be balanced in carbohydrates and protein. So a good example would be like a fruit smoothie with some whey protein in it. So it might end up being something like 50 grams of carbs and 50 grams of protein, and that's fine. They should have about 500 mils, same as these guys, about 2 hours beforehand. There's no necessary need for them to then rehydrate again before the event. But also keep in mind that if they had a smoothie, for example, and it was made with milk, well, that's fluids, okay? Because milk is largely water. So you wouldn't have the big fruit smoothie and then drink half a litre of water. That doesn't make sense. The overall goal with these guys, to know that they're adequately hydrated, is pale straw urine. I'll write the adequate hydration. This works for everyone, by the way, not just anaerobic athletes. It works for you, it works for these guys as well. To know that you are adequately hydrated, you will have a urination which is pale straw in colour. So not perfectly clear, it's just off clear, okay? So a little bit yellow, off clear. If you don't have the need to urinate, then you probably are underhydrated. That's a good sign. Or if you urinate and it's, that colour, then that's probably another sign that you are underhydrated as well. Because when we eat carbohydrates, they actually get stored in our muscle cells with water. So 1 gram of carbohydrate will take along with it 3 grams of water. Okay, so that's why if you have like 50 grams of carbs, you should also have 150 mils of water so that carbohydrate can actually be stored in your body. Otherwise, it just sits around and does nothing. Yeah, okay, that's pre-performance. Okay, so our guidelines for during performance, okay? During performance nutritional guidelines are really simple. We just need to make sure that we're not going to run out of fuel before we finish our performance. So that's going to vastly differ depending on what the athlete is, okay? Rough guidelines for you to remember. If the event is less than 60 minutes, okay? So 60 minutes you're looking at like a social game of touch footy or basketball, or just going to the gym, training, etc. What food do you need in that time? None. You don't need to run back to your gym bag in between sets and have a chew on a donut, okay? You're fine. Okay, hang on. I should caveat that. 1 sec. If pre-performance nutrition is done correctly, then this applies, okay? If you haven't done pre-performance nutrition, then this would change, okay? I'm not going to give you how it changed. You can probably figure it out. Obviously, if you're just going and you haven't had anything to eat at all and then you're going to go run a marathon, well, one, that's pretty dumb. But two, you'll probably need to increase the amount of carbohydrates and fluids that you are having during the event because, you didn't do it smartly. Anyway, so if it's fine, then we look at this. So like I said, under 60 minutes, nothing. Just keep adequate hydration. Remember, how do we know about adequate hydration? Yes, pale straw urine. Yes, it's gross, but yes, you can absolutely use it in your answers in the HSC and you will be marked correct. 60 to 90 minutes, so now we're getting to longer events. So think like maybe a rugby league match or a normal soccer match, okay? So adequate hydration is always going to be there for all of these steps. And actually, I'll give you a guideline for that at the bottom. And carbohydrates, about 30 grams per hour, okay? So 30 grams of carbs, you're looking at like a Mars bar, a can of Coke, but you wouldn't have a can of Coke because the carbonation in it could upset your tummy. But something like that, that's about 30 grams of carbohydrates, all right? A couple of slices of white bread will get you there too. 90 plus minutes, so now we're getting a bit longer, so you may want to extend the amount of carbohydrates you're having, but also now we're talking about this thing called isotonic fluids. It's the fancy word for electrolytes. So we can't just drink water anymore because what can happen is that if you're sweating out, because you remember your sweat is largely filled with electrolytes, okay, so there's sodium, potassium, magnesium, all right? If you sweat all that out and just replace it with water, which doesn't have sodium, potassium, magnesium, then what can happen is you can find yourself basically your body won't absorb the water and you'll just end up peeing it out more and you'll feel very tired, fatigued, you may faint, okay, etc. So this is why we need electrolytes. This is the whole purpose why Gatorade was sort of invented in the first place, because a bottle of Gatorade is an isotonic fluid with about 30 grams of carbohydrates, okay? This is also why it's pretty dumb to see like teeny boppers rocking up to the gym for their 30 minutes of weight session with their Gatorade, or they go straight up to the vending machine and they get a Gatorade because they think it's helping them. It's not. It's not helping you at all. It's not designed for you. It's designed for people who actually do hard things for long times. Anyway, that was a bit of a rant. Sorry about that. Then we've got 90 grams per hour, okay? If you happen to be doing like an ultra long event. So this is like 90 minutes to 2 hours. So think about the people that like, doing events that last 4 or 5 hours, okay? They need more of this and they need more of this, okay? So like Ironman, Tour de France, etc. Now, I did say I'd give you a more concrete guideline for fluid because people will be asking me for that. So if you guys can just remember, I've tried to match the numbers up to make it easy for you. 150 mils of water or isotonic fluid every 15 minutes of exercise. So you don't need to be chugging your water. Okay, so if you've got like a 600 ml shaker bottle, that should last you an hour, all right, just of hydration. Obviously, depending on how much you're sweating too, if you're just doing really low intensity stuff and you're not sweating, you don't need this, okay? If, however, you're doing like, let's say you're going for a 1 hour run and it's in the middle of the day in summer, it's 34 degrees, you're gonna need more than this, okay? So logic needs to be applied here a bit. Okay, so specifically during performance, if we're looking at someone like a marathon runner, they're going to be needing 150 mils per 15 minutes of fluid, okay? The fluid, if they're a marathon runner, should probably be an isotonic fluid, so electrolytes with sodium, potassium. They should probably have somewhere between 30 and 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour, okay? And a good example would be glucogels, and I'll actually bring some in and show them my class what they look like, because I do have some at home because I am a professional marathon runner. Blech, not. However, a weightlifter, they don't need nothing, okay? So remember, we're talking about during performance here, right? So a weightlifter who goes to a weightlifting meet for the day, they may have to perform many, like 1 repetition maximums throughout the day, throughout their performance. But during performance, we're talking about the one lift, okay? They're not gonna get the barbell halfway up and then wanna have a munch on something, okay? They don't need anything. Between lifts, yeah, sure, that probably kicks into this depending on how long the event is and how many lifts they're doing and how many hours they are, how much sweating they're doing, etc. But mainly during performance, they don't need anything. Same as a sprinter, right? Sprinter doesn't get halfway down the 100 meters and stops and has a snack and then keeps going. It's not necessary. Okay, post-performance, same proviso, I'm not going to write it up again, but providing your pre-performance nutrition and your during performance nutrition was on point, this applies, okay? So we've got the 3 R's to help you remember: refuel, repair, rehydrate, okay? Good nutrition is the first port of call to improve performance for next time because you are already starting to repair and get ready and adapt. So remember our stimulus response adaptations to next event. So refuel, what are we refueling? We're refueling our main fuel source in the body for events, which is glycogen done through carbohydrate consumption. So this is like immediately post-performance, I should say. This isn't like hours after post-performance, hours after they can just have a large, balanced, mixed meal, okay? We're talking about you've just finished your event, what are you doing, okay? So we're gonna have something like 1 gram per kilogram of carbohydrates, depending on the type of the event it was. Repair, this is probably important for both, more so for anaerobic, but I'll get into that in the next slide. But for now, 25 grams of protein, which is like 1 scoop of whey protein. Can go higher, but not nearly necessary. And rehydrate. So rehydrate is 1.5 liters of water per kilogram of body weight lost. So that means that prior to the event, if you happen to stand on a scale at the starting line and it said you were 70 kilos, you did your good during performance nutrition and hydration and everything, you feel like everything went to plan, but then you finished the race and you weighed 69 kilos. So you've actually lost a kilogram of body weight from fluid throughout that event, okay? Which means that therefore, immediately after the event, you need to consume 1.5 liters of fluid, okay, to overcompensate and bring it back in. So then finally, post-performance, what's it actually going to look like? We've got our marathoner and our weightlifter again. So our marathon runner is going to have a higher carbohydrate need because they've used more carbohydrates in their event. Hopefully it's all logical. So they may go up to like 1.2 to 1.5 grams a kilogram of body weight. Lower protein needs, they still need protein to repair. So remember, think about if you're running a marathon, all the damage that's going into your muscles, your connective tissues, etc. So you still need to repair, but they wouldn't have caused as much damage. So a good example would be like 600 ml chalky milk, or maybe some crumpets with honey and 1 scoop of whey protein, okay, just to satisfy. Once again, you'll notice all of these meals, they're all low fiber, okay? Should probably write that down, all low fiber. I'm making a point of that, and they're all low fat, all low fat. Because generally what happens is in the multiple choice section of the HSC, they'll ask you questions about this, and I'll give you like, what should the marathon runner eat post exercise, A, B, C, or D? And one of them will say something like blah, 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 high in fiber, or one of them say blah, 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 high in fat. You just eliminate them straight away. They're not the ones, okay? We look at our weightlifter, so they're sort of flipping. They need a higher protein need, so they may have 40 grams of protein, so 2 scoops of whey, and they can just stick on the lower end of carbohydrates, so 1 gram a kilo of carbs, depending on how much they've done. Like they may not even need carbohydrates at all, all right? Probably not optimal for performance, but that's, yeah. So a good example would be like a whey shake. So making a 2-scoop whey shake, and you've got a couple of scoops of dextrose. Dextrose is basically really simple sugar, really rapidly absorbed. They've got a lot in like weight gainer shakes and, you know, meal replacement shakes and stuff like that. Or you could go the chalky milk route as long as you add a scoop of whey, because the chalky milk doesn't have enough protein to satisfy the requirements that the weightlifter will need. Then, for both of these guys, okay, there's this one here. About 2 to 4 hours later, you just have your mixed high carb meal. So this can just be sort of anything, okay, you know, spaghetti bolognese, a stir fry with veggies and meat and stuff. Like this one can be normal fats, normal fiber, protein, carbohydrates, just mixed, a standard mixed meal, okay? Nothing special needs to happen at this point. I will say, hopefully logically, you can think of it though, if they've done an ultra marathon or a Tour de France, then this type of mixed meal is going to be higher on the carbohydrate end, okay? So this one might be like a massive bowl of pasta with some bolognese sauce, whereas the weightlifter may just have a standard sized bowl of pasta with probably more bolognese sauce to, you know, get higher protein intake, etc. So that you have to eat for your needs, okay? And because you guys are well aware and well versed on your energy systems, you know the types of energy or the ATP resynthesis pathways that both of these guys are using, and therefore you should know what they need to eat and rehydrate with. Oh, and don't forget the rehydrate was the 1.5 liters. That applies to both of these guys, 1.5 liters, but if you weigh a weightlifter beforehand and weigh him after, it's probably the same weight. So guess what? Doesn't need any water. But this guy, 1 kilo loss, 1.5 kilos of fluid. And that is the end of our crash course on dietary and fluid requirements for athletes. Thanks.